This video will introduce you to the Policy Commander Editor and how to create a custom policy from scratch. The Policy Commander Editor allows you to modify existing security policies and create new custom security policies. These policies are based on a format that's unique to New Boundary Technologies. The Policy Commander Editor, using 3 logical processes, allows you to target computers in a highly focused manner. The first of these logical processes is the applicability step. This stage determines whether the deployed security policy applies to the managed computer. An example would be if a policy was created for a Windows 2003 server and then was deployed to a Windows XP workstation. The policy would be non-applicable. The second step is the compliance step. This assesses whether or not the computer is currently in compliance with the applicable security policy. If the managed computer is not compliant with the security policy, Policy Commander will then continue on to the enforcement step. The enforcement step will enforce the policy and bring the computer into compliance. Compliance steps can include the installation of Microsoft security policies and Prism deploy packages. Let's have a look at a flowchart demonstrating how a policy works. The policeman is the security policy. Its first job will be to determine the applicability of the policy, so it has to ask the question, is the policy applicable to the computer? If the answer is no, then the policy is ignored and the status of non-applicable is reported back to the Policy Commander server. If the answer is yes, then the policy needs to assess the compliance of the computer. So it asks the question, is the computer compliant with the policy? If the answer is no, then the policy moves on to the enforcement step. At this stage, Policy Commander can enforce a rule, security template, or even a Prism package. When or if the answer is yes, the policy will report the status of enforced or compliant back to the Policy Commander server. I'm going to create a policy that sets the file permissions on a network share. I have a folder called Important Data, and inside this folder I have a customer database which I want to make sure is secure. The only people who should have access to this share are the members of the Company Directors Security Group. Whilst the permissions on the network share are correct, both the standard users and the network administrators can still access the sensitive data via the local file system. So by using the Microsoft security templates, I'm going to create an INF file that contains all the security permissions for the important data folder. Only company directors will have access to this folder. System administrators and standard network users will not be able to gain access to the sensitive data. Now I have the security template created, I'm going to open the policy editor. When you start Policy Commander's policy editor to create a brand new policy, get into the habit of filling out the policy details first. The next thing I'm going to do is to determine the applicability settings for the policy. I'm going to use a rule to determine the applicability settings. As you can see, there are a lot of different things I can use to determine the applicability of this policy. I can check to see if a particular application is installed or a specific day and time, right the way through to a computer's hardware configuration. For this policy, I'm going to check for the existence of the folder C:\important data. When I click on Next, it will name the rule C:\important data. So by clicking on the rule expert, I have the option of combining one or more rules together. So the second rule I'm going to use will make sure the computers are in the appropriate IP subnet of 192.168.8. By clicking on Finish, I have now combined 2 applicability rules together. The second step is to set up the Assess Compliance stage. This time, instead of selecting a rule, we select Template step. All I need do now is select Existing Template and browse to the security template I created at the beginning of the video. The INF file is now imported into the New Boundary policy. Next we need to put in the failure description of the policy. Be as descriptive as you can be here, because if your policy fails, this is the error message you will receive in your reports. The third and final item we need to configure is the Enforce Policy step. By default, Enforce the Compliance steps will already have been selected. I'm going to delete this step and then show you the options that are available to you. The 2 steps that you will use the most is the template step and the package step. The template step is for when you want to enforce a Microsoft INF security template. The package step allows you to use a Prism deploy package to enforce security configurations that cannot be achieved using Microsoft technologies. If you delete the default setting of Enforce Compliance Steps, just select the security template used to assess the compliance stage, and this will enforce the compliance. That's the policy created and configured. All that's required now is to save the policy and import it into the Policy Commander server.